They didn't run. They didn't leave. They didn't die. They were removed, systematically, surgically, like a threat buried too deep to speak of. And for 149 years, Kentucky has kept its mouth shut. What you're about to hear is not a story, it's a warning. A fracture line in the polished floorboards of American history, one that runs beneath old plantations, through courtrooms, beneath parlor rugs soaked in secrets. In July of 1876, at the height of the tobacco harvest, 41 men, women, and children vanished from Beaumont Plantation without a trace. No screams, no graves. Just cabins left as if they'd been frozen in time, and one man with too much to lose to ever tell the truth. Jeremiah Beaumont, grandson of the plantation's founder, had built a so-called success story, not of profit, but of principle. Former slaves, Irish immigrants, poor white farmers, working side by side, paid daily, schooled, respected. In theory, it was the future of the South. In reality, it was the death knell for the old guard. The problem wasn't money, it was equality. That plantation had become a crucible, where the very idea of post-war unity was being tested. But those in power didn't want unity. They wanted control, a clean hierarchy, the illusion of peace, enforced by fear. So when 41 workers disappeared overnight, no bodies, no witnesses, no demands, it wasn't just a tragedy. It was a message. And yet the official record says they fled, walked away from steady wages, community, and safety in the middle of harvest. But what those records don't include is what Margaret Beaumont found nearly 50 years later: letters hidden inside the walls of the manor. Letters written by Jeremiah himself in trembling hand, warning of something called the Kentucky Brotherhood, of meetings beneath the courthouse, of threats, of men who called themselves patriots but operated like a secret government. The plantation was beautiful. That's the first lie. They always start with aesthetics: white columns, green fields, the illusion of harmony. From a distance, Beaumont looked like prosperity incarnate. 3,000 acres of Kentucky's richest soil, dotted with neat worker cabins, wagons rolling through golden tobacco rows under the watchful eye of the main house. Visitors marveled at its order. But order is not peace. It is compliance, enforced. Jeremiah Beaumont wasn't like the others, not on the surface. He paid daily, built schools, tolerated integration. But let me ask you something. Why was that tolerated at all? Why did the county, steeped in post-war resentment and whispered racism, allow it? The answer? Because they didn't. They watched. They waited. And when the moment came, they erased it. Understand this. Beaumont Plantation was a threat to the Southern social order, not because of what it was, but because of what it could become. 41 workers weren't just workers. They were a symbol, living proof that the caste system could be dismantled, that black men and white men could earn the same wage, live in neighboring cabins, send their children to the same school. That hierarchy was a lie. But the lie had power. It fed men, protected dynasties, sanctified cruelty with scripture and law. So when the Brotherhood's letters started arriving in early 1876, Jeremiah didn't go public. He didn't warn the workers. He wrote to his brother quietly, contacted the governor discreetly, because deep down Jeremiah still believed in systems, still trusted the house built on blood. But the Brotherhood wasn't just a group of bitter men clinging to old ways. It was something older, something trained. These were not drunks with torches. These were men who understood optics, leverage, disappearance. That July night, every tool was still on the field. Meals half-eaten, beds unmade, wages. Power doesn't knock. It doesn't shout. It whispers. And when it comes, it doesn't take everything. It leaves just enough behind to make you question your own memory. That's exactly what happened on July 24th, 1876. The plantation bell rang at 5:30 a.m. as it always did, but no footsteps followed, no voices, no laughter, no rustling from the cabins. Jeremiah Beaumont walked to the workers' quarters and found something far more terrifying than blood. Stillness, doors hanging open, beds still warm, personal effects untouched, shoes by the door. A half-written letter from Patrick O'Sullivan to his sister in Boston paused mid-sentence. A pot of beans left simmering until it burned. No struggle, no panic, just absence. This is not how people run. This is how people are removed. Jeremiah reported it. Sheriff Danvers investigated for 3 days. Then came the visit from Magistrate Edmund Hartwell, a quiet meeting, a stack of sealed documents, and an immediate shutdown of the case. No press, no posters, no questions. Why? Because when systems fail to explain the unexplainable, they do what they were built to do, contain the narrative. And containment is often more violent than confession. The official story was simple. The 41 workers had abandoned their contracts and fled north. It sounded reasonable, convenient, clean. But let's think like men, not sheep. These weren't seasonal laborers. They had homes, wages, savings, children in school. Why would they run in the middle of harvest, at the peak of earning season, without taking a single possession? They wouldn't. But someone needed them gone. And someone even more powerful needed it to be forgotten. This is the anatomy of sanctioned disappearance. The operation begins with threat, then surveillance, then the erasure, not just of people but of memory. The tobacco fields were scorched, not randomly, precisely. There's a reason some events are too quiet. Not because nothing happened, but because something did, and too many hands were involved in making sure no one heard the scream. In the days after the disappearance, Sheriff Danvers searched the fields, the barns, the tree lines surrounding Beaumont. He found nothing he could explain, but that doesn't mean he found nothing. Footprints that led nowhere, horse tracks covered with fresh soil, and most damning of all, tools left in perfect formation. Tools laid down as if their owners had simply ceased to exist. But that's not the part they buried. The real silence began with the visit from County Magistrate Hartwell. Hartwell wasn't just a judge. He was the gatekeeper, the funnel, the filter. You see, every county has one. A man whose job isn't to uphold the law, it's to manage perception. He's the kind of man who owns land but never works it, sits in church but doesn't believe. And when the Brotherhood sent their warning letters, he didn't need convincing. He'd been a member all along. So when he arrived at the sheriff's office, the case was already closed. Hartwell brought with him a sealed envelope, legal documents, testimony from anonymous sources, and a gag order. The workers were involved in illegal activities, he said. The details were classified. Any further investigation would damage the county's economy and reputation. Let that sink in. 41 people vanish, and the response is not grief. It's public relations. That's how you know it's institutional. Because true power doesn't respond with justice. It responds with narrative management. It doesn't stop the crime. It redirects the conversation. And that's what the Brotherhood specialized in. Their goal wasn't just to erase the workers. It was to restructure belief. To teach every landowner, every sheriff, every citizen in Bourbon County, step out of Lee. The letters started arriving exactly 1 week after the disappearance. No postage stamps, no return addresses, just folded parchment sealed with red wax, pressed with a symbol no one wanted to describe out loud. It looked like a tree, but upside down, roots above, branches below, and in the center an open eye, bleeding. These weren't threats. They were instructions. Every plantation owner in the region received one. So did the sheriff. So did the coroner. Even the editor of the local paper. And not a single one of them dared speak publicly about what they read. But we know pieces of it survived, passed down in whispers, scribbled in the margins of private journals, archived in dusty church records never meant for daylight. The letter spoke of balance, of payment, of harvest beyond soil. And it made one thing very clear. The Beaumont land was not theirs to question. It belonged to older arrangements. Pacts made long before Kentucky was a state, before settlers ever arrived. Pacts sealed in something older than ink, That's when the fear shifted, from what happened to the workers to why it was allowed to happen. Because this wasn't just a disappearance. This was a ritual. Every 41 years, one plantation, one cleansing, one blood tithe to preserve the illusion of prosperity. And the brotherhood? They were just the middlemen, the enforcers, the caretakers of a covenant that predates the county map. It was the church that cracked first. Reverend Amos Renner, once a beloved spiritual leader, went mad during a Sunday sermon. He screamed about the inverted tree, about the breath in the dirt, about how no cross could bless a place already claimed by something else. He was found that night in the bell tower, eyes wide open, mouth packed with tobacco leaves, tongue missing. They buried him without a service. Because the moment he broke the silence, everyone else roared. By August's end, the Beaumont fields had grown unnaturally lush. Taller than ever, leaves broader, tobacco so rich in scent it made men dizzy after mere seconds in the curing barns. The local buyers called it the finest crop in a generation. Some claimed it smelled faintly sweet, like burning sugar and rust. But others, they knew better. Because beneath that richness there was a rot. Something buried beneath those rows that fed the plants with more than water and ash. Something that shouldn't have been nourishing anything. The new workers, brought in from neighboring counties, were warned not to ask about the previous crew. They weren't told the names of the 41 missing, not even told where they'd been housed. Their cabins were razed, their belongings burned. It was like they never existed. And anyone who dared dig, figuratively or literally, was watched closely, not just by the overseers, but by the townspeople, especially the old ones. They said it plainly. Don't look too long into the dirt here, boy. It looks back. One worker, Silas Reddick, ignored the warning. A tall man with Union scars and a distrust for silence. He kept a diary. And on September 3rd, he wrote, "There's something under the field. I hear it at night. It don't sound like wind. It sounds like breathing. And sometimes, just before dawn, the earth feels warm, like it's alive." Silas went missing 3 days later. His bunk was empty, boots still by the door, tools still in the shed. But the next harvest row over, every stalk was snapped in half, tobacco leaves shredded, and the soil churned like it had fed. There was no search party. No questions. Just a quiet Sunday service, and another record scratched into the chapel ledger, under departed, Silas Reddick, transfer to God's mercy. But God wasn't the one taking them. Not in Beaumont. Because the dirt had already been fed once, and now it was hungry again. The church in Beaumont had no steeple, no bell, just a squat stone structure built before the war, its altar stained with time, and perhaps more. The preacher, Father Murchison, was older than memory, pale eyes, voice like bark-scraping wood, and he never spoke of God as a savior. Only as a witness. Every Sunday the town gathered, workers, landowners, even the children, under the same sagging roof. And each week Father Murchison would repeat the same prayer. May the roots stay bound. May the ground stay closed. May the offerings be taken. And may the silence never break. It wasn't scripture. It wasn't even in English at times. Parts of it drifted into tongues older than Kentucky, older than Christ. Whispers of the old world, the hidden world, twisting through the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Most assumed it was metaphor, tradition, a relic from immigrant superstition. But those who'd been on the plantation long enough knew better, because every time that prayer was skipped or stumbled or spoken out of rhythm, something happened. A cow born with no eyes. A child found sleepwalking into the fields. A patch of cured tobacco that reeked of burnt meat. In the fall of 1876, after Silas vanished, Murchison added a line to the chant, "And may those who disturb the earth return to it, quickly." A warning or a deal. Either way, it was obeyed. That week, 2 boys from the town, Elijah and Thomas, snuck into the northern rows of the plantation on a dare. They wanted to see if the stories were true, whether the ground really breathed. They laughed, dug a small hole with their hands, and ran when they swore they heard a low, wet groan rise from beneath Elijah, made it home. Tomas never did. His parents waited on the chapel steps until morning. And when they asked Father Murchison for help, he simply said, "The field took what it was owed. Let it keep its silence." The following morning, the plantation workers refused to step into the northern fields, not out of fear, but reverence. They called it the breathing soil, and none dared trample it unless ordered. Silas Beaumont, already buried in the dirt by rumor, was now legend, a caution carved into every whispered story, every look passed between laborers at dusk. But someone else didn't believe in superstition. Charles Witherell, a government man from Lexington, had arrived in Beaumont a week before Tomas vanished. He claimed to be conducting a census of laborers for new federal records, said he needed to document the working conditions of post-bellum plantations. But when he asked for the workers' names, no one answered. Because no one knew them. 40-1 people had been working the Beaumont land that summer. No papers, no pay slips, no housing records, just mouths to feed, backs to break, and names that changed weekly, depending on who was asked. Charles dug deeper. Too deep. He began wandering at night, sketching the layout of the fields, taking notes on foot patterns and crop decay. One evening he spotted something the locals had long learned to ignore. A half-buried row of stone markers deep in the north. No names, no dates, just crude carvings, circles with vertical lines drawn through them, like eyes scratched shut. When Charles asked Father Murchison about them, the old man answered flatly, "They're promises, not graves." The next day, Charles Witherell disappeared. His horse was found tied to the post outside the chapel. His journal, missing. The local sheriff, when asked, shrugged and said, "Probably rode on to Danville." But a boy swore he saw Charles entering the northern fields that night. He followed the sound of humming, a hymn, not in English, not even human, just low, guttural melody rising from beneath the dirt like breath through a coffin's lid. No. Fall came early that year, like a curtain falling on a play no one wanted to finish. The skies darkened faster, the wind took on a sour stench, and the fields, once green with life, turned a strange reddish-brown, like rusted metal or dried blood. Locals whispered that it wasn't the cold killing the crops. It was memory. The land had started remembering. Sheriff Abel Crane finally acted. Pressured by whispers from Frankfort and fear from his own men, he gathered a small posse and marched into the northern fields with lanterns, shovels, and a preacher. But they didn't even get 5 steps in. The soil swallowed one of the horses whole. No trap, no sinkhole, no scream. Just a wet crunch, and then silence. Even the insects fled. The preacher begged them to leave. Said he'd read of such things in old European manuscripts, earthbound echoes that feasted on blood spilled without proper rites. He called them grief pools, places where trauma becomes sentient, and the land itself takes offense. Crane was unmoved. He ordered 2 men to start digging where Charles Witherell was last seen. What they unearthed was not a man. It was a tunnel, hand-dug, narrow, twisting like veins through the earth. Inside were claw marks, not just from hands, but from fingers stripped down to bone. Human nails embedded in the walls, pieces of cloth and teeth. But worst of all, the singing. It came up through the tunnel like smoke. Not loud, just there. A lullaby sung in a language lost to time, echoing from somewhere farther down. That night, Crane quit, burned his uniform behind the chapel and rode east, never to be seen again. The next morning, the tunnel entrance was gone, replaced by smooth, untouched soil. As if nothing had ever been dug at all, Father Murchison declared the northern field sacred land and forbade anyone from trespassing. The chapel bells rang once every week, not faux. By the end of 1876, the Beaumont name was no longer spoken with pride. It was whispered with dread. The plantation, once a symbol of Southern resilience, had become a cautionary tale. The land was cursed, they said, not metaphorically, but truly, cursed in the old world sense, Like something ancient and forgotten had been disturbed and awakened. No new workers would come. Even desperate men refused the pay. The tobacco crop, twisted and blackened, was left to rot in the fields. But Henry Beaumont wouldn't leave. Obsessed with the land, he wandered the edges of the northern field nightly, murmuring to himself in a journal he never let out of his sight. People swore they saw him talking to the ground, not praying, conversing. As if expecting answers. One cold November night, a boy named Elias, no older than 12, went missing while delivering eggs to the manor. He was last seen stepping up the porch steps, and never came down. His mother went door to door screaming, begging, but no one would help. No one would even meet her eyes. That was the last straw. Reverend Murchison organized a torch-bearing march to the Beaumont estate. They didn't want answers. They wanted blood. But when they arrived, the manor was wide open. Not a door locked, not a window cracked. And Henry Beaumont gone. But in the study, they found the journal. Pages filled with sketches of tunnels, of mouths in the dirt, of echoes in the soil, and diagrams of rituals dating back to pre-Celtic Europe. One entry repeated over and over, "The dirt remembers, the dirt remembers, the dirt remembers." There was one final note, written in a different hand. Cursive, elegant, almost feminine. They fed us to the land, and now the land feeds on them. They tried to burn the manor that night, but the flames wouldn't catch. The wood was too damp, too cold, too alive. From that day forward, no one crossed. Spring of 1877 brought no relief, only silence. The kind that hums just under the surface, like the calm before something unspeakable. The Beaumont land was untouched, avoided by all. Even the birds refused to fly over it. Something in the air repelled life, like the earth had exhaled something ancient. And it hadn't stopped breathing since. The townsfolk tried to reclaim the land once. They sent in 3 men, volunteers armed with crosses, rifles, and a dog named Jasper. They stepped past the broken fence, marched toward the house, swallowed in vines, and vanished before they even reached the porch. Jasper's barking echoed for hours before it stopped mid-howl. When the men were finally found, if you could call it that, their skin was gone, not torn, not burned. Gone. Like it had been peeled gently off and folded away, clean, surgical. No one spoke of it again. Families moved, schools emptied. Churches held vigils that turned into exorcisms. They tried salt circles, chants, imported priests from as far as Boston. But the ground wouldn't yield. Every tool rusted, every shovel snapped. One man claimed the soil was soft as breath but heavier than guilt. By summer, something new grew across the plantation, twisting vines with black-veined leaves and red buds that pulsed like beating hearts. A botanist named Dr. Lenora Gates came from Ohio to investigate. She called them Beaumont's bloom, said they weren't in any records, not even the hidden ones. She collected a sample, wrapped it in linen, and boarded a train home. She never arrived. Weeks later, her apartment in Ohio was discovered empty. On the wall, a message had been burned into the plaster. She asked the wrong question. What grows in cursed soil? The letter B was drawn underneath, not signed, just drawn, carved with something hot and sharp. And back in Kentucky, the red blooms had multiplied. Some say it was Reverend Elijah Marr who dared to return. A man of God, forged in fire, convinced that evil, no matter how deep, could be driven out. He arrived with a Bible, a lantern, and a vial of water blessed by 7 priests. The locals begged him not to go. They warned him. The Beaumont place didn't just hold evil, it fed it. But he went anyway. The journal he left behind, found days later, sealed inside a wooden box buried behind the church, tells what happened next. His entries begin strong, faithful, certain that his mission was holy. He speaks of the stillness, the sickly sweet scent of rot, and the way the wind refused to touch the trees. On the second day, the writing changed. His words grew sharp, frantic. He said he saw eyes blinking from the bark of trees, heard voices whispering his name, not in malice but in familiarity. They don't hate me, he wrote. They remember me. On the third day, he spoke of a door in the basement of the main house. Not a physical door, no wood, no handle, just a space in the wall where light bent wrong and sound didn't echo. He claimed it breathed, that it pulsed when he prayed, that something behind it mocked him. It said my name before I spoke it aloud. He tried to bless the land, poured the holy water into the roots. The ground swallowed it, boiled it, turned it into steam that screamed as it rose. The final entry is just one sentence. It's not a place. It's a womb. When they found his body, his skin was intact, but his eyes were gone, clean sockets, no blood, no violence, just empty. And on the back of his neck, in scorched flesh, B41, the 41, Saint. Not one more, not one less. The Beaumont plantation had claimed another soul, and marked him like the others. Only this time, it kept the eyes. Because sometimes, the soil wants to see who comes next. After Reverend Marr's death, a hush fell over Beaumont County that lasted generations. No one dared step near the plantation. Roads were rerouted. Families moved away. The county removed it from official maps, as though silence could erase the horror. But silence only feeds memory in darker ways. Then came the railroad men. In 1921, the Louisville-Nashville Railroad needed a shortcut through the hills, and Beaumont's land was the flattest stretch in the region. Surveyors, engineers, and dig teams came with steel tools and heavy machines, convinced the old legends were just Appalachian superstition. Progress doesn't believe in ghosts. They began cutting into the earth near the old tobacco fields. And the earth began pushing back. The first crew vanished within 48 hours. No signs of struggle, no sabotage, just lunchboxes still open, cigarettes still burning, steam engines running cold, and 19 men simply gone. The company called it a landslide. The press called it sabotage. But the locals knew. They said the ground had tasted blood again and wanted more. So they sent in a second crew. This time they brought armed guards, floodlights, dynamite. But the deeper they dug, the stranger things became. Tools rusted overnight. Maps no longer matched the terrain. Men reported hearing voices in the dirt, chanting in a language no one recognized. Workers would wake up with red soil packed under their fingernails, even though they hadn't dug yet. Then came the night the machines turned on by themselves. Every engine, every drill, every generator, all at once. One survivor said the machine screamed, not mechanical failure, but like animals in pain. Another claimed the soil opened and something climbed out. The next morning, 11 men were missing. On a steel beam scrawled in grease and blood, 41 will never be enough. The project was abandoned, tracks rerouted, files C. It wasn't long before the stories bled out. Quiet whispers in train station bars, hushed warnings at county fairs, murmurs behind closed church doors. Everyone knew someone who had worked on the Beaumont line. Everyone knew someone who never came back. But what terrified them more was who did. A lone man stumbled into a telegraph office in Somerset, clothes shredded, skin pale as chalk. Mute for 3 days, he finally spoke one sentence before dying in his sleep. They're still digging, but upward now. His hands were blistered, torn to the bone, soil embedded in the wounds, not from digging down, but from clawing up, as if trying to escape something buried alive. Or worse, trying to stop it from escaping. The body was stolen from the morgue that night. From there, the sightings began. A girl in Liberty claimed she saw a tall, shadowless man standing motionless at the edge of a field, facing toward the old Beaumont land. A conductor reported figures walking between the train cars at night, barefoot, bleeding, heads tilted as if listening to something underground. None showed up in the passenger manifest. In 1935, a survey plane snapped an aerial photo of the region. In the center of the abandoned plantation, clear as day, was a giant spiral burned into the crops, thousands of feet wide, made of concentric circles like a fingerprint pressed into the earth. By the time a ground crew arrived, it had vanished. but locals had already started calling it the spiral hunger. And every year, without fail, on the anniversary of the first disappearance, a light appears deep in the fields, just one, flickering, like a lantern swaying from a worker's hand. The county put up fences, signs, security patrols. But it didn't matter. In 1954, the fencing was torn down from the inside. Every camera lens on the property cracked simultaneously, and in the silence that followed, by the mid-20th century, the Beaumont property had become more than a haunted tale. It was a place no one spoke of in daylight. Cartographers quietly stopped including it on maps. Pilots rerouted flights to avoid flying over it. Even government surveys skipped the square mile around the plantation, always blaming equipment failure or unstable terrain. But it was neither. Something was refusing to be recorded. In 1967, an anthropology team from the University of Chicago attempted to investigate the disappearance of the 41 workers, framing it as a study of racial labor history. They arrived with cameras, notes, and radiation monitors. By day 3, their transmissions stopped. Radios fell silent. Planes sent to recover them reported only a single visual: a thin pillar of black smoke spiraling into the air, then dissipating like it had never existed. Of the 6 academics, only one was ever found. He had walked nearly 30 miles barefoot to a ranger station, his eyes burned out, tongue removed, jaw broken like it had been forced shut. He carved one word into the floor with a sharpened twig before dying of blood loss. Below, rumors exploded. Was it an ancient burial ground, a cursed mine, a site of ritual? Theories included everything from geological anomalies to cultic sacrifice. But one forgotten ledger finally surfaced: a faded Beaumont payroll document from 1876. The last recorded job title of the missing workers? Feeders. They weren't building anything. They were offering something. And whatever accepted the offering was still hungry. By 1974, the Beaumont legacy had become a scar that refused to heal. A cursed inheritance of whispers, missing persons, and a silence too loud to ignore. Local officials passed ordinances that unofficially banned anyone from purchasing land within the plantation's bounds. The remaining acreage was labeled unsuitable for agriculture, unstable for development, and finally, unfit for human presence. But not everyone listened. A group of amateur urban explorers, 3 men and 2 women from Louisville, decided to spend a single night at the site. They brought night vision gear, walkie-talkies, even a thermal drone. What they captured would never be released to the public. Only one body was ever found, drained, contorted, and embedded halfway into the earth, as if it had tried to crawl inside the soil. The drone footage was leaked briefly before being scrubbed from every platform. Those who saw it described a chilling pattern. Beneath the ground, heat signatures moved like arteries, pulsing, responding to human footsteps. The plantation wasn't dead. It was awake. And then came the sound. On the final 5 seconds of the corrupted audio file, a voice, low, rasping, and layered in tones no human larynx could produce, spoke 3 words in perfect English: "They still feed." Since then, no reputable team has returned. The state won't acknowledge the site. Locals refuse to speak its name. But once a year, without fail, someone vanishes along the property's old boundary line. No pattern, no trace, no motive. Just a void where a life used to be, and the undeniable sense that somewhere beneath the fields, something ancient is still opening its mouth. In 1983, an independent journalist named Carla Mendez made it her mission to uncover what she called America's Plantation of the Damned. She wasn't chasing ghost stories. She was tracing the money. Following obscure land deeds, black budget grants, and sealed court records, Carla discovered something deeply unsettling. The land hadn't been abandoned. It had been privately acquired by a shell corporation registered in Delaware. The owner? A front company connected to a chemical conglomerate that had no business owning farmland. But here's the catch. They weren't farming. They weren't mining. They weren't even developing. They were paying millions to keep people away. And in 1984, Carla vanished. Her last known transmission was a series of muffled recordings captured on a backup cassette. In it, she can be heard panicking, gasping, repeating two phrases. There's something under it. The ground is breathing. No official investigation followed. Her family was silenced with a non-disclosure agreement and a suspiciously generous settlement. Her name never made national news. But in the years that followed, whispers began to circulate in fringe research communities that the Beaumont land had become an extraction site, not for oil, not for gas, but for something older, a resource that didn't deplete, a hunger that didn't end, a presence that never let go. And those who profited from it, they weren't just protecting a secret, they were feeding a legacy soaked in blood, silence, and something no human language was ever meant to describe. In 1997, a leaked Department of Energy memo, quickly scrubbed from all known servers, contained a single satellite image. It showed the Beaumont land glowing in the infrared spectrum, like a living organism. Patterns in the soil resembled vascular systems. The center pulsed, not metaphorically, literally. There was heat, movement, rhythmic surges. Beneath a tobacco plantation that hadn't grown a single leaf in over a century. A redacted portion of the memo included this line: possible biothermal anomaly of non-terrestrial classification. Recommend continued containment protocols. Refeeding schedule remains classified. Refeeding, that same term found in the 1876 ledger, the one labeling 41 workers as feeders. And it wasn't just one generation. It was scheduled, recurring, necessary. The plantation wasn't cursed. It was functional. Every 41 years, going back to 1793, there had been disappearances, reported plagues, or unexplained sinkholes around the region. Every 41 years, people went missing. Every 41 years, it was fed. Locals knew. That's why the nearby town never grew, why no one wanted the land, why entire families moved away in the weeks before each cycle. In the next year, 2034, the cycle begins again. And this time, they won't need workers. Technology has made it easier. Anonymous, faster, people vanish all the time, from shelters, from borders, from broken systems. And the thing below, it's still waiting. Every government, every institution that ever tried to shut the Beaumont site down, quietly stopped. The files, buried under national security clauses. The testimonies, sealed until 2100. The survivors, all dead, or silenced, or made to vanish so completely that their own families were told they never existed. But one whisper keeps surfacing, a single name spoken by truckers who deliver late-night shipments down empty roads, by emergency dispatchers who answer static-filled calls from inside the dead zone, by dying men in padded hospital cells screaming until their throats bleed. Mosh Kuthar. Not a man, not a demon. Something older. A hunger that predates speech. Worshipped by the land long before Kentucky had a name. The Beaumonts weren't just landowners. They were priests. Their plantation wasn't a business. It was a temple. And those 41 workers, each one selected, prepared, and offered in a precise ritual of obedient surrender. The glowing soil, the pulsing core, the rhythms underground. Those weren't accidents. They were heartbeat and breath. And every offering, every sacrifice, it wasn't just eaten. It was remembered. The thing below doesn't sleep, it dreams, in colorless visions that infect those who come too close. That's why no one lives there anymore. That's why even wildlife avoids the borders. But soon, someone will go back. Because the land is stirring. The heartbeat is quickening. And the hunger? It's become curious again. The last known photograph of the Beaumont plantation was taken by a geology student in 1987. It's blurry, uneven. Off-center. But in the corner, beneath the crumbling remains of the old tobacco barn, there's something not right. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. A figure. Bent. Long-limbed. Its face blurred not from motion, but from something far worse. Like the camera itself couldn't comprehend what it was seeing. The student never made it home. Her car was found 2 counties over, engine still running, tape recorder in the passenger seat. The final seconds? It's moving, underneath. They're all still down there. They're all... Static locals say you can still hear shovels some nights. Not digging into the earth, digging out. Quiet metal clinks that echo across dead tobacco rows, followed by the wet sound of something breathing from beneath Dot. And in town, an old woman, last of the Beaumont bloodline, sits on her porch, humming that same funeral hymn passed down for centuries. Her eyes gone white, her tongue split down the center like a serpent's. She doesn't speak anymore. But sometimes, she smiles Dot. Because the earth remembers Dot. Because the blood remembers Dot. Because hunger always returns Dot. And in Kentucky, in a forgotten corner where the dirt grows darker with every rain, the missing are coming back.